My parents are sitting in the living room right now, holding official name change documents that I refuse to sign. They have been crying for the past 2 hours because I told them that their guilt about my name is not my problem to solve. 16 years of regret about naming me Sonny instead of something more masculine has finally exploded into a full family crisis. Last week they presented me with 3 replacement names and demanded that I choose one before graduation. They said they could not live with the guilt of giving me what they now call an usurious name for a man. When I refused to legally become James, Luke, or Matthew, my mother accused me of being selfish and inconsiderate of their feelings. The paperwork is still sitting on our kitchen table. My parents have already paid the lawyer fees and court costs. They filled out every section except my signature. For 6 months they have been pressuring me to let them fix what they consider their biggest parenting mistake. Today I finally told them that I love my name, and I am never changing it. My father said I am ruining my future by keeping a name that nobody will take seriously in the business world. My mother cried and said she feels terrible every time someone asks about my unusual name. They both insisted that I should think about their feelings and consider how much guilt they carry about this decision. But here is what they do not understand. I have loved my name my entire life. Sonny represents the hope and joy they felt when they finally chose something for themselves instead of following family pressure. Now they want to erase that moment of independence because they decided it was a mistake. The name change documents have a deadline of next Friday. If I do not sign them, my parents will have wasted $500 in legal fees. They are betting that I will eventually give in to avoid causing them financial loss and emotional pain. They have no idea that I would rather change my last name and cut contact with them completely than give up the identity I have carried for 16 years. My mother keeps asking why I'm being so stubborn about something that would make everyone happier. My father says I am prioritizing my feelings over the family's reputation and my own future success. They genuinely believe that loving my name is a sign of immaturity and poor judgment. But I am done pretending that their regret is my responsibility. They named me Sonny because they wanted to break free from family expectations. Now they want to change it because they are embarrassed by their own moment of rebellion. Let me tell you exactly how my parents destroyed their relationship with their son by trying to fix a problem that never existed. But let me take you back to when this nightmare started and show you how 2 people can convince themselves that their child's happiness matters less than their own comfort and social acceptance. My story begins 16 years ago, when my parents made the most rebellious decision of their lives. I am the youngest of 4 children, and all of my older siblings have traditional family names. My brothers are named after our grandfather and great-uncle. My sister carries our grandmother's name as her middle name. Every previous child had been named according to strict family expectations and traditions. But by the time I was born, my parents were exhausted by family pressure and demands. They had spent years listening to relatives argue about every decision they made. The family had opinions about everything from where they lived to how they disciplined their children. When it came time to name their 4th child, my parents finally rebelled. They told both sides of the family that they were choosing a name based on what they liked rather than what tradition demanded. This caused massive family drama and arguments, but my parents stood firm. They named me Sonny because it represented hope, light, and happiness. They loved that the name was optimistic and unique. For the first 10 years of my life, my parents told this story with pride. They described my naming as their moment of independence from family control. They said that choosing Sonny proved they could make decisions based on love rather than obligation. My name represented their growth as parents and individuals. But somewhere around my 10th birthday, everything changed. My parents started expressing doubts about their choice. They began treating my name like an embarrassing mistake rather than a loving decision. The pride they once felt turned into regret and anxiety about my future. The shift in my parents' attitude toward my name happened gradually. But I remember the exact moment I first noticed something was wrong. I was 10 years old, and we were at a family barbecue where my aunt was introducing me to some of her friends. When she said my name, one of the women made a comment about how unusual it was for a boy. My aunt laughed and said something about how my parents had gone through a creative phase when I was born. She made it sound like my name was the result of temporary insanity rather than a deliberate choice. My mother, who was standing nearby, did not correct this characterization or defend their decision. Instead, she looked embarrassed and quickly changed the subject. That evening, for the first time in my life, my parents started calling me by my middle name during casual conversation. When I asked them why, they said they were just trying something different. But it felt strange and wrong to me. I had been Sonny for 10 years. My middle name felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. When I told them I preferred my first name, they stopped using my middle name temporarily. But I started noticing other small changes in how they talked about my name. They stopped telling the story about choosing it as an act of independence. They started mentioning that they had considered more traditional options. They began treating my name like a phase they had grown out of. By the time I turned 13, my parents started asking whether I had ever considered using a nickname. They suggested that some of my classmates might find Sonny too childish as I got older. They wondered whether I might want something that sounded more mature for high school and beyond. I told them honestly that I loved my name and had never wanted to change it or use a nickname. My friends called me Sonny. My teachers knew me as Sonny. I could not imagine being called anything else. The name felt like a fundamental part of my identity and personality. But my parents continued dropping hints that they thought I should consider alternatives. When I was 14, they mentioned that some teenagers choose to change their names before graduating high school to save money on college degree corrections. They said this like it was common knowledge, but I had never heard of anyone doing this. Last year, the hints became more direct suggestions. My parents told me that I looked like a James and asked what I thought about the nickname Jamie. When I said I liked Jamie as a name but preferred Sonny for myself, they seemed disappointed. They started bringing up Luke as another possibility, asking whether I thought it suited me better than my current name. The pressure intensified over several months. My parents began having serious conversations about whether my name would hurt my chances in job interviews and professional setting. They worried that potential employers might not take me seriously with such an unconventional name. They suggested that changing it now would save me from discrimination and awkwardness later. But every time they brought up these concerns, I reminded them that I loved my name and planned to keep it forever. I told them that any employer who would discriminate against me for being named Sonny was not someone I wanted to work for anyway. I pointed out that plenty of successful people have unusual names without professional problems. Their response was always the same. They said I was too young to understand how the business world really operates. They insisted that I would thank them later for protecting me from the consequences of their youthful mistake. They genuinely believed that loving my name was evidence of naivety and poor judgment. 6 months ago, the conversation took a dramatic turn. My parents sat me down for what they called a serious family discussion about my future. They told me that they deeply regretted choosing such an unserious name for me. They said that calling me Sonny had been a mistake, based on emotion rather than logic. They explained that they felt guilty every time someone asked about my unusual name. They were embarrassed to tell people that they had prioritized their own creative desires over my professional prospect. They said that keeping my name would be selfish because it would force them to live with constant regret and worry about my future. This conversation shocked me because my parents had never expressed these feelings so directly. For years, they had framed their concerns as being about my well-being and success. Now they were admitting that their real motivation was reducing their own guilt and embarrassment about a decision they had made 16 years earlier. I told them that I understood their concerns, but that I was not willing to change my identity to make them feel better about choices they had made before I was old enough to have opinions. I pointed out that I was the one who would have to live with whatever name they chose, so my feelings should matter more than their regrets. But my parents disagreed completely. They said that, as my parents, they had the right and responsibility to correct mistakes that could harm my future. They argued that teenagers often make poor decisions about important life choices, and that parental guidance was necessary to protect me from my own immaturity. The conversation ended with them asking me to think seriously about allowing them to change my name before graduation. They said they wanted to fix their mistake, while there was still time to minimize the impact on my adult life. They promised to choose something mature and respectable that would serve me well in professional settings. I agreed to think about it because I wanted to end the conversation, but I had no intention of changing my mind. I loved my name, and I was not going to sacrifice my identity to resolve my parents' guilt about a decision they had made with love and hope for their fourth child. 3 weeks ago, my parents escalated their campaign to change my name in a way that I never could have predicted. I came home from school to find them sitting at the kitchen table with official legal documents spread out in front of them. They had visited a lawyer, paid consultation fees, and prepared all the paperwork necessary to legally change my name. The documents were professionally prepared and completely filled out, except for my signature. They had chosen 3 alternative names for me to consider: James with the nickname Jamie, Luke, and Matthew. Each option was written in neat handwriting at the top of separate forms. All I had to do was select one and sign my name to make the change official. My mother explained that they had decided to take action because they could not continue living with the guilt of their naming decision. She said that every time someone commented on my unusual name, she felt terrible about prioritizing their own preferences over my future success. She described their regret as a constant weight that affected their daily happiness and peace of mind. My father added that they had researched the legal process and discovered that changing my name now would be much simpler and cheaper than waiting until I turned 18. He said that acting while I was still a minor would save me time and money later, when I inevitably realized that my name was holding me back professionally and socially. They presented this ambush as a loving gesture, rather than emotional manipulation. They genuinely believed that they were protecting me from future discrimination and embarrassment. They could not understand why I would resist their attempt to fix what they considered an obvious problem with an obvious solution. I stared at those legal documents for several minutes without speaking. Seeing my name printed officially on legal paperwork that was designed to erase it felt surreal and violate. These people had given me my identity 16 years earlier, and now they wanted to take it away because they had changed their minds about their own decision. When I finally responded, I told them clearly and calmly that I would never sign those papers. I said that I loved my name and considered it a fundamental part of who I was as a person. I explained that changing it would feel like erasing myself to satisfy their regrets about choices they had made with good intentions. My mother immediately started crying. She said that I was being selfish and stubborn about something that would benefit everyone involved. She pointed out that they had already spent money on legal fees, and that refusing to cooperate would waste their investment in my future. She accused me of caring more about my own preferences than their emotional well-being. My father became angry and defensive. He said that I was too immature to understand the long-term consequences of keeping an unprofessional name. He argued that I would regret this decision when potential employers passed me over for jobs because they could not take someone named Sonny seriously in business settings. But their emotional manipulation only strengthened my resolve. I told them that their guilt about naming me was not my responsibility to fix. I pointed out that they had chosen my name with love and hope, and that trying to change it now was dishonoring their own moment of independence and rebellion against family pressure. I reminded them that for the first 10 years of my life, they had been proud of my name and the story behind it. They had told people that naming me Sonny was their way of breaking free from family expectations and making decisions based on their own values. Now, they were asking me to help them undo that moment of courage because they were embarrassed by their own boldness. The conversation became increasingly heated as my parents realized that I was not going to change my mind easily. My mother accused me of being ungrateful for everything they had done for me. She said that allowing them to change my name was the least I could do to show appreciation for 16 years of love and support. My father threatened to make the name change a condition of continued financial support for college. He said that if I was determined to make poor decisions about my future, they might reconsider their commitment to paying for my education. He argued that investing in someone who refused good advice was a waste of their resources. But these threats backfired completely. Instead of making me more compliant, they revealed the true nature of my parents' motivations. They were not trying to protect my future success. They were trying to eliminate their own discomfort about a decision they regretted. They were willing to use financial coercion and emotional manipulation to force me to solve their problem. I told them exactly this. I said that threatening to withdraw college support proved that their concerns were not really about my well-being. If they genuinely believed that my name would harm my career prospects, they would want to ensure that I had the best possible education to compensate for any perceived disadvantages. I pointed out that using money as leverage to force identity changes was emotional abuse disguised as parental guidance. I said that loving parents would respect their child's attachment to their own name, rather than trying to pressure them into becoming someone else to reduce parental guilt. My response shocked them because I had never spoken to them so directly about their motivations and methods. For months, they had framed this issue as being about my future success and happiness. Now I was forcing them to acknowledge that their real goal was reducing their own emotional discomfort about choices they had made voluntarily. My mother stopped crying and became defensive. She said that I was being dramatic and ungrateful. She argued that parents have the right to correct mistakes that could harm their children, even if the children are too immature to appreciate the intervention. She insisted that they were acting out of love rather than selfishness. My father accused me of being manipulative and disrespectful. He said that questioning their motives was inappropriate and hurtful. He argued that they had earned the right to make decisions about my name because they had chosen it originally and supported me for 16 years. But I was not backing down anymore. I told them that earning the right to make decisions about someone else's identity was not how healthy relationships work. I pointed out that my name belonged to me now, regardless of who had chosen it originally. I said that I was the one who would have to live with whatever name appeared on my driver's license, college diplomas, and professional documents. I explained that my attachment to my name was not about stubbornness or immaturity. It was about maintaining my sense of self and refusing to let other people's regrets dictate my identity. I told them that changing my name to make them feel better would teach me that my own feelings and preferences matter less than other people's comfort. The argument continued for over an hour, with my parents alternating between emotional manipulation and logical arguments about practical concerns. They brought up potential embarrassment in professional settings, difficulty with name pronunciation, and assumptions people might make about my background or family. But every concern they raised revealed their own insecurity about the choice they had made rather than legitimate worries about my future. They were projecting their regret onto me and asking me to fix their emotional problem by sacrificing my own identity and attachment to the name I had carried my entire life. Finally, I told them that the conversation was over. I said that I would never sign those legal documents regardless of what consequences they threatened or what emotional pressure they applied. I made it clear that I would rather emancipate myself legally than allow them to force me to change my name against my will. This threat scared them because they realized that I was completely serious about maintaining my boundaries. They had expected me to eventually give in to their pressure, but I was prepared to take legal action to protect my right to keep my own name. My mother asked what would happen to the money they had already spent on legal consultations and document preparation. I told her that wasting money on unwanted legal services was the natural consequence of making assumptions about other people's willingness to cooperate with plans they had never agreed to support. My father asked whether I understood that refusing to change my name meant they would have to live with permanent guilt and regret about their parenting decisions. I told him that managing his own emotions about choices he had made 16 years earlier was his responsibility, not mine. The conversation ended with them realizing that their campaign to change my name had completely failed. I had not only refused to cooperate, but I had also forced them to confront the selfish motivations behind their pressure campaign. They could no longer pretend that they were acting in my best interests rather than trying to reduce their own discomfort. The aftermath of that confrontation has been both liberating and difficult. My parents have not mentioned the name change document since our argument 3 weeks ago, but the legal papers are still sitting on the kitchen table like a monument to their failed attempt to control my identity. The deadline for submission passed last Friday, which means they wasted $500 in legal fees. My mother has been treating me with cold disappointment, as if my refusal to change my name was a personal betrayal of our relationship. She makes comments about how stubborn I am, and how I will regret this decision when I am older and wiser. She seems to believe that time will prove her right about the professional disadvantages of having an unusual name. My father has shifted to a different strategy. Instead of pressuring me directly, he makes pointed comments about successful people who have traditional names. He mentions job interviews he has conducted where candidates with unusual names made poor first impressions. He talks about the importance of fitting in with corporate culture and professional expectations. But their continued attempts to change my mind have only strengthened my conviction that I made the right choice. Watching them struggle to accept my decision has shown me how much their regret about my name was really about their own insecurity and need for social approval, rather than genuine concern for my well-being. I have started researching successful people who have unusual names to counter my father's anecdotal evidence about professional discrimination. I discovered that many entrepreneurs, artists, scientists, and business leaders have distinctive names that help them stand out rather than holding them back. I realized that my parents' fears about name-based discrimination were largely based on their own assumptions rather than real evidence. More importantly, I have come to understand that my name represents something valuable about my family's history that my parents want to erase. When they chose to name me Sonny, they were asserting their independence from family pressure and making a decision based on love and hope, rather than tradition and expectation. The fact that they now regret that moment of courage says more about their current insecurity than it does about the wisdom of their original choice. They want to change my name because they are embarrassed by their own boldness and creativity. They want me to help them pretend that they never had the strength to resist family pressure and choose something meaningful for their fourth child. But I refuse to participate in rewriting our family history to make them feel better about their own growth and independence. My name is a reminder that they once had the courage to prioritize love over tradition. Changing it would erase evidence of their best parenting moment and replace it with proof that they eventually chose conformity over authenticity. I have also realized that this conflict has taught me important lessons about boundaries and identity that will serve me well in adult relationships. Learning to resist emotional manipulation and stand firm in my convictions at 16 will help me navigate similar challenges throughout my life. My parents' campaign to change my name showed me that people who claim to love you will sometimes try to change fundamental aspects of who you are to make themselves more comfortable. They will present these demands as being for your own good, while actually prioritizing their own emotional needs over your autonomy and self-determination. Recognizing this pattern and refusing to cooperate with it has been empowering. I have learned that I do not have to sacrifice my identity to maintain relationships with people who love me conditionally based on my willingness to meet their expectations and preferences. The legal documents are still on our kitchen table because my parents have not decided what to do with them. Part of me thinks they are hoping that I will eventually change my mind and sign them before they expire completely. Another part of me suspects that they keep the papers visible as a reminder of how disappointed they are in my decision. But seeing those documents every day has become a source of strength rather than pressure. They remind me that I successfully defended my right to keep my own name, despite intense family pressure and emotional manipulation. They prove that I have the courage to stand up for my convictions, even when doing so disappoints people I love. My relationship with my parents has certainly been damaged by this conflict, but I believe that damage was inevitable once they decided that their regret mattered more than my autonomy. Any relationship built on my willingness to sacrifice my identity for their comfort was fundamentally unhealthy and unsustainable. I hope that eventually they will come to understand that my refusal to change my name was not about disrespecting them or ignoring their concerns. It was about maintaining my sense of self and refusing to let their regrets determine my identity. I hope they will recognize that loving me means accepting the person I am rather than trying to transform me into someone who makes them more comfortable. In the meantime, I am focusing on building relationships with people who appreciate my name and the story behind it. My friends have always called me Sonny without question or concern. My teachers know me as Sonny and have never suggested that my name was inappropriate for academic settings. My employers at part-time jobs have treated my name as just another aspect of my identity, rather than a professional liability. These experiences have confirmed that my parents' fears about name-based discrimination are largely unfounded. Most people are more interested in my character, skills, and personality than in whether my name fits traditional expectations. The few people who might judge me negatively based on my name alone are probably not people I would want to work with anyway. I am planning to keep my name throughout college and into my professional career. If I ever encounter actual discrimination based on my name, I will address it as it happens, rather than preemptively changing my identity to avoid hypothetical problems. I refuse to live my life based on worst-case scenarios imagined by people who regret their own choices. Most importantly, I want to honor the courage and love that my parents showed when they chose my name 16 years ago. Even though they now regret that decision, I believe it was one of their finest moments as parents. They chose hope over fear, creativity over conformity, and love over tradition. I want to carry that legacy forward by embracing the name they gave me and the values it represents. To anyone dealing with family pressure to change fundamental aspects of who you are, I want you to know that you have the right to maintain your identity, even when doing so disappoints people you love. Your name, your appearance, your interests, and your values belong to you. Other people's regrets about choices they made do not obligate you to transform yourself to make them feel better. What would you do if your parents wanted to change your name after 16 years? Do you think children should have the final say about their own identities, or should parents have the right to correct what they consider mistakes? Share your thoughts in the comments below.